Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this opportunity to meet one of our most distinguished alums, Wendell L. Taylor, graduate of the law school class of 1998, someone that I've gotten to know very well as a member of the board of trustees. Actually, I met Wendell first when he was serving on one of the law school committees. So Wendell, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and with your busy schedule. I'm assuming everybody knows who I am, right? I don't need to introduce myself. So Wendell, let's get right down to work and start this conversation. And as we know, you're the managing partner of uh, uh, Hutton, Andrews and Kurt in Washington, D.C., one of the outstanding law firms in this country. Uh, Give us some sense of your journey to this particular position, where you're from, where you went to undergraduate school, because we see you didn't go to the University of Richmond undergraduate school. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Crutcher, for that. And I really appreciate you inviting me here tonight, and always love talking to you and being involved in anything related to University of Richmond. So I'm really happy to be here. So yeah, I will start back at the beginning. I was born in Richmond, Virginia, on the south side of Richmond. My father died in an accident before I turned one. So I was raised by my mother and three older sisters. And my mom, I'm sure, is on now. If not, she's calling in, and she listens to pretty much every talk I give. So hi, Mom. I went to Richmond Public Schools with very few non-Black students. And I went to a really, really rough middle school, Mosby. It's on the north side. It was about 40 minutes away from my house by school bus. But because of the antiquated busing system in Richmond, they sent us folks from the south side all the way over to the north side. The busing system obviously was intended to help integrate the schools, but by the time they'd gotten around, or I'd gotten around to going to middle school, all of the white families had either moved to the counties and the suburbs, or they were sending their kids to private schools. And so really what the busing system did in Richmond was just, bus Black kids from one side of town to go to school with Black kids from a different side of town. And so that's what happened at Mosby. Internally at Mosby, they split us up into two different teams. So they had all of the kids from Southside on team A, and then they had all the kids from Northside on team B. And then they had a much smaller alternative team. I couldn't think of a better name for that, I guess. And that was for the gifted and talented program. I resisted being on the alternative team in 6th grade and 7th grade. And my mom let me do that. Thank you for that. But by the 8th grade, they said, look, we don't have any other classes for you to take. You've got to go to the alternative team. And that was rough. At my grade level, there were only 2 boys on the alternative team, one other than me. And that's pretty tough. I felt like I was a target. And one day, a police officer showed up at a class of mine and took me out of class because the only other boy in my grade on the alternative team had got into a fight with some kids on the B team, and they'd beaten him pretty badly, and he got sent to the hospital. And so the school thought that I was in danger. And so they sent a police officer for my protection. So yes, you heard me correct. I had a police escort in middle school, and it was just a crazy time. So I learned a couple lessons there. One, I learned to, keep my mouth shut and not mouth off like my buddy had done, especially when you're outnumbered as badly as we were. I was naturally quiet anyway, so that was easy for me. But it also taught me one other thing, and that's that sports can really shield you in those settings. And so I had to think of something to change my existence in middle school there. So I went out for and made the basketball team at Mosby. as a defensive measure, really. I didn't like playing basketball all that much in an organized fashion. I loved playing pickup basketball, but didn't like the crowds coming to see me play or anything. But it was much better playing basketball than being sent to the hospital or having a police escort to class. And so I was happily doing that. Um, Luckily for me, Richmond switched up the busing system at the start of my ninth grade year. And I went to a much better high school, Huguenot, on the west side, pretty close to the University of Richmond.
Yes, yes.
I was still a quiet kid, but my gym teacher encouraged me to go out for the football team on literally the first day that I showed up in his class. And I did that. That was on a Monday. I played in the JV game that Wednesday, and they moved me up to varsity that Friday. And so overnight, just like in middle school, I was much more popular because of sports. On the inside, I was still this, nerdy, quiet kid, but on the outside, I was a budding football star, and I was really happily wearing that mask of a jock. Um, we had a great team. We almost won the state my junior year. We lost the state championship game, and we were all back to try to win the state championship my senior year. But early in my senior year, I broke my ankle, and my high school football career was taken away from me. Adversity had struck, but it was a blessing in disguise because I was able to focus my recruiting on schools like Wake Forest, who are academically focused. So it was a very positive step for me, and I got a scholarship from an excellent school. Then in my third year at Wake, football was taken away from me again, this time for good. I got sick. I got really, really sick. I couldn't eat because of sores and lesions in my mouth and throat. I had pussy, bloody lesions all over my skin, which I won't get into in detail. I lost 40 pounds during that football season. I was literally dying. I went to doctor after doctor for months, and no one knew what was wrong with me. And eventually, I was diagnosed with a rare genetic blood and skin disorder, a genetic disorder that caused an overactive immune system. And so my body was producing too many white blood cells, and with nothing to fight, they were killing my organs. And this disorder was fatal until the 80s. But after months of fading closer to death, I was diagnosed and survived. And luckily for me, the doctor that had come up with the treatment for this was a doctor at Wake Forest Medical Center. So when someone asks me what caused me to be so successful, there's really only one answer, and that is adversity. Having my goals shattered, caused me to just set other goals. It caused me to work hard towards those goals. I don't look back and say, what if I'd played my entire senior year of high school? I don't look back and say, what if my college career hadn't been snatched away from me? Because, for one, I mean, what good does that do to even think about that? What if I played one more play and broken my neck, right? What if I'd played more and gotten chronic CTE or something else like that? What if I hadn't broken my ankle in high school and gone to a college football factory and gotten sick there? Would I have lost my scholarship? And so, I am happy to have gone through those experiences. I don't look back. I try to look forward. The reality is I probably wasn't going to play pro football anyway, and I use football to benefit me. No one knows that I didn't play my senior year of high school unless I tell them. No one knows that I didn't play 4 or 5 years at Wake unless I tell them. But everybody knows who meets me. They find out that I play college football, and literally no matter what I do in life, I can do all sorts of great things. But the thing that folks want to talk about the most is tell them stories about how it was to play college football. So anyway, we're close to law school now, and the illness really shaped me.
Wendell, let me ask you one question.
Uh-huh.
How did you, what were the symptoms? Did you just suddenly wake up one day and you had these lesions?
Yeah, so it started in August. I was at home, and I remember I felt this weird little pimple on the roof of my mouth, and it's something like if there's something in your eye, you keep playing with it because you want it gone.
Right.
and the pimple was there and it wouldn't go away. And after a day or so, it kind of opened up and was bleeding. And within a week or so, those little pimples would form in my mouth and then open, stay open, and it was
Oh,
hard to eat.
wow.
And they were all over my mouth and throat. I had to, I would take to swallow was even hard, let alone eating solid foods. So I was eating a diet of, soft scrambled eggs, really, and I would take a chloroseptic, and I would
Hmm.
squirt chloroseptic. I'd take a bite of food, swallow it, and take another squirt, and then eat again. And so, that was the first symptom. The lesions didn't start on my body for about on the outside of my mouth for about 3 months after that. But at that point, I really figured that I was
That's cool.
dying. And within about 6 weeks after that, I was diagnosed. But I mean, coming close to death like that, changed how I was wired.
Hmm.
I felt like then, and kind of do now, that I was living on borrowed time. Before that, I wasn't much of a risk taker. But even with keeping my head down and not taking any risks, I almost died from a rare disease. And so I felt really what I needed to do was to take more risks. I needed to do scary things. And there is a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote on this. It says, "Do that which you are afraid to do." And in college, the scariest thing imaginable is law school. And so I took the risk and applied to law school, and only to Richmond. I wanted to go back home, and Richmond has a great law school. So that's what I did. Law school was relatively easy compared to the insane schedule I had playing college football and then coaching for my last 2 years. But really, it was taking more risks and doing the scary things that was the key to my success in law school. Running for president of the student bar was risky. I could certainly have lost. Um, it's something that I would never have done in high school or college. But taking that risk led directly to me taking another risk that led to me getting the dream job at Hunton that I got. It was at the second summer of law school, which was, strangely enough, it was weeks after the police brutality incident that I'm sure we'll talk about in a few minutes. Um, but as president of the student bar, I gave a speech to the alumni council at the law school. And my talk was just supposed to be about, student activities and things like that. What were the students up to? But I sat in on the council meeting all day, and they were discussing law school rankings. And Richmond was trying to get in the top tier. And I'd read a recent article that I thought was relevant. So I took a risk and decided that instead of talking about mundane student groups and things like that, I was going to talk about the issue at hand, even though no one had asked me about it. And so the article was about perception over reality.
Hmm.
And they'd taken they'd done a study, and they'd taken a poll of sorts. They polled judges and practitioners and law students. They'd given them a list of names of colleges and asked them to rank them in order of how good they think their law schools are. And every year, Princeton makes it into the top 10. And as you know, Dr. Crutcher, Princeton doesn't have a law school.
Law school. Right.
And so I stepped to the podium and talked about this article. And I said, in the eyes of most people, Richmond law will never be perceived to be as good as Princeton law. Best for us to just focus on, doing what we do best, turning out lawyers that know how to practice law in a city with courts and things like that. And because you know what? Richmond law will always be better at turning out quality lawyers than Princeton law will be. So at the end of my talk, the head of the council came over, Ken Alcott. He's also the hiring partner at Hunton. And he said, you should consider our firm, and the rest is history. So I spent 5 years.
I
Thank
love it.
you. Yes. So yeah, so I started my career at Hunton in Richmond, went off to the Justice Department working for Jim Comey. I was a prosecutor for a while, and then came back to Hunton as a partner in the DC office. And now I'm the managing partner of the office of about 180 lawyers. So I will end my story with that. Um, 6 years ago, the office had only had 3 managing partners in roughly 45 years. And then seemingly overnight, there was a fourth. And I said then that if the role ever opened up again, that I needed to act swiftly. And in the interim, I stayed close to the managing partner of the office. I took on some of the duties that he didn't want to do. I even started calling myself deputy managing partner. And I started going to meetings on his behalf. And then 3 years ago, he decided to leave the firm with a small group, and he approached me to leave with him. And I quickly turned him down and told him I wanted his job. I went to firm leadership. I told them that I'd got an offer to leave with this group. I first told them that those folks were leaving. I showed my loyalty, said I was staying. I talked to other partners in my office, and I told them that I wanted to be managing partner of the office. And overnight, I was the managing partner of the office.
Great, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wish some of our students could be, well, of course, you're very generous with your time, Wendell, and I've spoken to students, but particularly, I love your take on the on the rankings, because you're so spot on that, and that's why I always say for us, I mean, while, when you're doing well in the rankings, you want to tout it, but that cannot be your sole raison d'etre.
Right.
If you, and that's why I say to the, if we're doing things that we would automatically do because we want to continue to be an academically excellent institution, that's fine if they also satisfy the rankings. But I'm not going to do things just to be satisfying the rankings.
Absolutely.
Wow, that was. I'm so sorry, our undergraduate students couldn't heard your story right now, but I'm sure you'll be sharing it. So, I've really enjoyed having you and working with you as a member of the board, and you literally hit the ground running. I mean, am I remembering correctly, Wendell, was your first meeting the retreat we had in Florida?
Yes, 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 it was.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So you went right out of the frying pan into the fire. Well, but listen, in addition to working with Richmond and your role as a trustee and in other leadership roles, I know you're also involved with the Military Bowl. Tell us a little bit about your other volunteer work, as well as the volunteer work that you've done at the University of Richmond.
Right. Okay, yeah. So I'll start with Richmond because it's, as I've said before, it is near and dear to my heart. I've stayed close to the school since I graduated from law school, and I've been on several boards at the law school, and currently serve on the Dean's Advisory Council. So when I was asked to join the board of trustees, I really jumped at that opportunity. You only have a small amount of time to give to groups like that, so I wanted to pick the right ones. And certainly the board of trustees was one that I wanted to do. And I also, care a lot about Wake Forest. And so the Military Bowl is, college football postseason bowl game. It usually pits a school from the ACC against a school from the AAC. And it has usually, it intends to have a rep from each of the member schools. And so they were looking for a Wake rep, and preferably somebody that had played football at Wake. And so I was really happy to join the bowl board. And this bowl, different than practically all of the other bowls, it has a great mission. It is a nonprofit bowl, and the mission is to serve the troops. And so, I didn't serve in the military, and I thought this would be a great way for me to give back. And so I'm really happy to be a part of it. In the past, we've been sponsored by Northrop Grumman. This year, we are currently, the title sponsor is a company called Perspecta. It is a defense contractor focused on technology. We had a rough year this year because of COVID. We weren't able to have a bowl. We wanted to, but there weren't any teams that could make the trip. We had a couple teams lined up, and then they had COVID issues. And so we were, there were certain bowls that did happen. We were like that next bowl that would have happened had there been two more teams that were able to play. And so it was a rough time for us. But luckily, our title sponsor and a guy who's the CEO there, Matt Curtis, they put up all the money that they had planned to do, even though we didn't have a game, and that kept us afloat. And I'm really thankful to Mac and the bowl. And we actually end up, turning a profit this year because of what that company had done for us. So it's a great mission, and hopefully we will be back and have a game in the end of 2021.
Nice. And in the bowl, are the teams that play only the from the military academies?
No, no, no. If you kind of go down the list in the ACC,
Oh
the
yeah,
top bowl is the Orange Bowl, right? And so the Orange Bowl basically gets first pick. And you go down the line, and I think we're 6 or so to pick. And so we usually get to pick one ACC school against one AAC school. And so that's who it is. And the game is played at Navy Stadium. So we love having Navy there, and we do have them there about once every 4 years. It's better for us than them. Navy would like to play anywhere else but their own stadium.
Their own stadium.
Yeah, but it's really great for us when they're there because the fans are there. But yeah, in the past, there have been, basically all of the ACC schools have come there at one point or another, including Wake that played about 3 years ago and beat Temple. Go Deeks.
Well, listen.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really drew a lot of inspiration from last year was a podcast that you did for you. I think it was for your employees. It's called Our Pain, and it left a lasting impression on me. And I'm wondering if you just talk a little bit about that and the opportunities that followed.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So for those that haven't heard it, my podcast, Our Pain, I created it within days of watching the George Floyd tape. And it focuses on 3 encounters I've had with law enforcement, negative encounters. First, when I was an 11-year-old boy who was accused of stealing at a convenience store, I was detained by a store clerk and searched by police. And this was even after I had the foresight to leave my book bag outside the store, lest I be labeled a criminal. Second, at Wake, I was wrongly accused of a crime and arrested for something that I didn't commit after an eyewitness claimed that I fit the description of the person that had been in a bar fight. But I really couldn't blame her. The police had already pulled up, shoved me against a car, and had me in handcuffs when they drove her by to identify me. And then third was the incident that I mentioned earlier, where I was in law school. It was during my second summer at the University of Richmond. And the irony there is I was working as an intern at the Richmond prosecutor's office, and I was working on a motion that was in defense of a different Richmond police officer's stop and search of a different Black man. I'd gone from the prosecutor's office to the law school because I had an office there as student bar president. And this was my law school. That didn't matter to the officer that came up to me. He was in plain clothes. It didn't matter that we were in the law building, that we were in front of the law library. It didn't matter to him that I was quoting case law on his insufficient, reasonable, articulable suspicion to stop me. It didn't matter to him that I was 5 inches taller or 40 pounds heavier than the person he said he was looking for. He grabbed me, pushed me against the wall. He was nose to nose with me, baiting me to push or do anything to justify his actions. But instead, I just put up my hands, didn't move forward. I told him that he should put me under arrest if he thought he had the reasonable basis to do so. I was actually thankful that I had the prior, situations with law enforcement before the law school encounter, because those created, kind of calluses psychologically that toughened and protected me and prepared me for that encounter. Had I not had those before, maybe the incident would have been more shocking. Maybe I would have pushed back or ran or whatever. Maybe his actions would have triggered that fight or flight response. Maybe I wouldn't be here to talk to you about it. So I encourage you to listen to Our Pain if you haven't already heard it, and share it with those in your circles to foster empathy. like you said, Dr. Crutcher, it started out just as a talk I give to my office. I'd done that weekly since March. And I felt compelled to tell my story that week. And so I did so. And I really let myself go there, and, feel the pain. And I taped it for those who weren't on the call. I sent it around to the office that day. And within hours of me sending it just to my folks internally, Jim Comey, who doesn't work at Hunton, reached out and said he'd heard it and thanked me for it. So apparently folks at in my office have started sending it around to people. The next day, partners at other law firms called and asked if they could share it with their firms. And that's when I put it on SoundCloud and titled it Our Pain. Richmond shared it as well.
Mhm.
I've gotten calls and emails from folks all over the world. One guy sent an email, said he listens to it every night before he goes to sleep. Um, and I've had at least a dozen speeches and other things that have come from it. So I'm really happy to be a part of the much needed conversation that's taking place in our country right now.
Well, I mean, it was really, really powerful and impactful. So thank you for doing that, because it's obvious that it's made a real impression on folks around the world, as you say. I'm also curious. I'm going to ask you one last question about the future of UR, but I'm curious. I've never asked you this before. Now that you've had a chance as a board member to learn more about the entire university other than the law school, particularly the undergraduate school, how would you say you are, at least in your perception, differs from Wake Forest?
That's a great question. Part of the reason why I went to Richmond because of how similar they are. Small,
Mhm.
small and liberal arts.
Mhm.
Both in big tobacco towns, right? And so I felt, like it would be a good experience for me. And so I think it has played out that way. I think they are very similar. I think some of the challenges we have in the future are challenges that my firm has, or practically everybody has, and that's keeping up with technology. In the legal profession, for example, when I was a young associate, I would spend countless hours looking through boxes of documents and coding them for whatever case I was on. And so if I ever needed any extra hours, I could always find a case to jump on and just sit in a room, grab a document, a box of documents, look through that box and look at every page and code it. So I have a blue sheet, and check off the box of different things that document dealt with. And you could do that for literally months or even years in major cases. Well, now we scan those documents in, and we have programs that code those documents. After you do 4 or 5 of them, they can code the next million in an afternoon. And so those are things that lawyers will never do again. You can say the same about, again, any situation in this country. And so I think, the future of higher ed really is dependent on keeping up with technology. We were talking earlier, Richmond, I think, has always been on the forefront of that. When I started in law school at Richmond, it was the first law school in the country to give laptops to their students. And it was cutting edge then. I would hate to see what that laptop looks like now. It probably looks like a big rock, but it was something that no one else did. And so I think for us to flourish, we have to stay ahead of technology and continue to grow with it. And those schools that do that will survive and advance, and those schools that don't will be left behind. And so I'm happy to be on the Board of Trustees to kind of help move us in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think in terms of technology? I mean, I have to say that in this past year, when we've had to adapt because of COVID, I happen to think we've learned a lot. And when I say we, higher education institutions have learned a lot about how to utilize technology to help us deliver the quality education that we already offer. But I'm wondering, do you see technology? I mean, it's on the undergraduate level for the kind of, small residential liberal arts institution playing a even more of a role in the future than it does now?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly will, but we can't discount how great it is to be on campus. When I talk to students, I talk to kids in schools all over, and oftentimes they'll say, oh, I don't want to go to college, and I say to them, dude, like college was the most fun I've had in my life. Like you want to be on campus. So even if you can sit in your classroom or sit in your dorm room and be on a Zoom, class, I think it's still important to be there and to be with other kids your age because you get a lot out of that. It's the first time you live on your own, for example. And so I hope that we don't go to a system where we take that away because I think that there's a lot of growth in that as well. So we have to keep up with technology, but we can't miss out on the human element that we gain by being in person on campus.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly because it's a very different experience. And you learn how to live, study, play, eat, with people who are very different from you, from all of other parts of the country as well as the world. And I also happen to think, you learn the skills of how to how to live in a democratic society, in all the various things that you have to do in a residential college situation. So I think the technology will provide a lot of help and assistance. Personally, I happen to think, particularly on the content delivery side, and delivering content
Right.
for students, and which will, in a sense, free up the professors to spend more time doing what they already do very well, and that is engaging the students, interrogating them, because learning is deeper when you're forced to talk about something that you've read or that you've learned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I have kids that are in Zoom classes now, and folks are talking about what a damage this is on them, and the kids in general. To me, and they always ask, when do we go back to the way we were? And I always laugh because like when do we ever go back? Like it's not like we're gonna press a button and we'll go in reverse and we'll end up in 2019 or something, right? Like we're always going forward. And so just because kids aren't in person as much now in, grade school, for example, doesn't mean they aren't getting a full experience as long as you can supplement that with other ways that they can see their peers, right? The kind of the things I was talking about with Richmond. But there's some kids that I'm sure are doing much better now that it's virtual. And school shootings have gone down to zero, right? So there are always positives. And really it's about focusing on those positives and taking those things and moving forward. But the idea of going back to the way we have been, it's comical. It's a complete fallacy. We always move forward. We never go back.
No, but and with respect to that, let's switch from educational to kind of to the business, the business world. What do you think will be the lasting impact of what we've experienced for now almost a year with COVID on the way businesses operate, particularly those that operate in businesses that are professional in businesses operating in offices and things like that?
Right. So, I think this is, speeding up trends that were already in place. We're talking earlier, 2 years ago, the main issue I was dealing with was whether we should take back the fifth floor in our building. And, we had sublet it and, making a good amount of money on that. Or do we take it back and grow? And for me as managing partner, I was always wanted to grow. We decided to forego that for one more year, take the money. And it's just funny now to think back that we were ever thinking about getting more office space.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in the future, law firms and businesses will certainly have less of a footprint that way. And so, I think that's a trend that we were already going to.
Yeah.
You know, in my profession, there typically are partner offices that are big and nice, and then other offices that are smaller. In the future, we'll have single size offices, and this firm is going to that now. We will have shared offices because there's no need to have an office that I come to, at this point. I hadn't been, I am at my Hunting office now. I hadn't been here since I think October. And so,
Wow.
yeah, maybe a year from now, I will come more than once every 4 months or so. But
Mhm.
will there ever be a day that we're all in the office at the same time? Probably not. So I think it is making us more efficient.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have to get in my car every day and drive 30 minutes to the office. And so that's more time to free up to either do more work or to hang out with my kids,
Mhm.
hopefully somewhat more of the latter. But yeah, so I think that's just a trend that was already starting that has been put into kind of hyper speed.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I mean, I have to say, when this all started last March, I was thinking, in my mind, through how we get certain things, as you know, in your own office, you have routines, right? That you have, and I'll give you one example. Every single day, I would get a notebook this thick with my briefings for the day, the evening before. Now, I will be honest, at one point in time, because it seemed like it was taking so much time to put those together,
Hmm.
I said, why don't we just go online? Why don't we do just, don't give it to me? And it didn't work so well when I tried it the first time. And so I wanted more paper.
Uh-huh.
But guess what? This time, because we're remote, it had to all be online. And now it's been since March, and I'm accustomed to it. I
Yeah,
don't, if I need something, if I have some remarks or a speech that I want to look at while I'm at the gym, I just copy it that and put it in a document and print it out and do it.
totally. Yeah.
And I I'm a generation ahead of you. I mean, when I think now of just how my whole lifestyle has changed within that period of time, it's amazing to me. It really is. And I realize that that there are things that I can do uh, that, for instance, I don't have to travel as much.
Right.
I wouldn't have to travel as much now because I'm doing a lot of those stewardship visits this way, and it's working. It's working well. That's been a surprise to me. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I have a story about that. I mean, I have clients that are all over the country, and oftentimes it's tough to schedule in-person meetings with them. And you try to schedule something, and they hated getting on a Zoom call like this. And so you would try for months and months to get on the calendar, and then sooner or later, you would say, okay, I want to find another reason to have to be in X place,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
so I'm going to go to Texas. I'm going to conference, and I'm going to just keep bugging the client until he's got a lunch. But really, you are going there just to see that
Right.
client.
Just to see.
And yeah, and so you spend 2 or 3 days basically in another city, playing planes and everything else to talk to a client for what is basically a lunch meeting. Well, now I talk to my clients more often
Yeah.
because they're all happy to find time on their calendar to hop on a Zoom for 20 minutes. And so it's just making us better, I think. And so
Yeah.
hopefully we can continue to move forward.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think years from now, sociologists and anthropologists and other folks, psychologists, are going to have lots of dissertations coming out of just the changes that we've all experienced within this last year. It's been quite amazing to me to think to see how things have changed.
Absolutely.
Well, Wendell, this has been a real pleasure to spend some time with you this evening and learning. I learned some things this evening I wasn't aware of. So I'm sure that those alums and others who are on the Zoom call this evening are fascinated by it. You have an amazing story of perseverance, hard work, determination, that I'd love you to come and share with our undergraduate students, because you'd be a real inspiration. You are a real inspiration for them. So thank you so much for taking the time. And for those of you who are with us this evening, thank you for being with us as well. And I want to thank our staff, Laura and Megan, for doing all the behind the scenes work to make this possible. All we had to do was show up
To
tonight.
show up and talk. Yeah.
So
Thank you, Dr. Crutcher, and thanks everybody
oh,
else.
surely.
Go
Thank you.
Spiders.
Take good care, and I'll see you Friday at the board meeting.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.